Hello and welcome. What we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at how films construct meaning. And this is the really tricky part of understanding films and talking about them when you're writing a response about them. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at all the different bits of it. The language of film, visual techniques, and also things like sound, lighting, and music. Now what we're going to be looking at in those is we're going to be looking at how they work together to create meaning. And we're also going to look at how the meaning will be shaped by your response. And basically, if you're going to look at it that way, is it depends on the subject you're doing. So if there's a theme that goes along with the film that you're studying, and the questions you are asked. So basically what that is saying is that depending on the question you're asked, you may be asked to talk about a film and its meaning differently. It's not to say that each film has a constant meaning either. It can change, and it's up to your interpretation. But we'll get onto that a little bit later. So basically asking yourself what it is I need to do in my answers when I talk about filmmaking. That's mainly what you're going to be looking at. So let's have just a very quick look at some different things and different ways of constructing meaning. First of all, most questions will ask about themes in the story. That is the main idea or the feeling that comes out of the film. So it might be a theme of fear or love or revenge. It could be a main idea such as racism or war. And themes generally go off in those two different categories. So if you ever need to know what themes are, just think of it as either feelings or ideas. So sort of like the reactions that you get when watching a film, the sorts of ideas that get you to watch a film in the first place. They sort of work very similar ways to what genre does. So genre is the type of film that you watch, and themes are the sorts of ideas that come out in the film, and which are very much a big part of what you will be doing when you respond to them. Now, the majority of questions will focus on how a film presents these. So it presents these themes. How does the theme come across? So how does that idea of fear come across? What sort of techniques do they use to try and make you feel afraid? So if you're looking at a horror film, now not that you'll be looking at many horror films when you're studying a text at school, but if you were, and you wanted to know about how they're constructing that theme of fear, then you look at the sorts of techniques that they would use to scare you. If it's about hopelessness or something, then what sorts of things makes that person or makes the film seem like it's about hopelessness? So the problem with that though, and this is a trap that many get into, is that if you retell the story, so that's what I really don't want you to do. When you answer the question, don't retell the story. Because we know what the story is. It's assumed that a teacher marking your work will know what the story is. What you need to do is discuss the ideas and techniques which relate to the theme. So, not to say what parts of the story relate to the theme, but the techniques and the way it's represented. It's about representation, not to prove that that theme exists. Because the question is asking you about that theme, so obviously it has to exist in the story somewhere. Now, if they're asking even if you agree or disagree, you still need to use basically the ideas and techniques to back up your work. You can't just pull them out of thin air. So let's have a look at the film techniques and the making of films and how this works. Firstly, theme making in film is more than just storytelling, as I mentioned before. It is done mainly through the visuals and audio. So basically the language of film. So when you look at all those things together, then the atmosphere created, which is basically what the theme usually stems from, is that atmosphere, that sense of storytelling, then those things contribute to the theme being created in a story. And it is for this reason that it is important to identify a variety of techniques. So don't just focus on one, don't just focus on camera techniques. See if you can find some other things in the film as well. Things like lighting, costumes, sound. Sound is a good one to use because it's not one that's discussed very often, so it's one that can help your work stand out a little bit. So even think about things like music. Now music is something that you don't really notice very often, but it's something that if you mention music and the way that it changes for different parts of the film, then you are in a position where you can really add some depth to your response, and that's a really good thing to have. Okay, so let's look at some things like characterization, because this is another part. So we looked at themes, now we're going to look at characterization. Now, another aspect you'll be asked to explore is basically around the characters in the film and their roles. So it can revolve around the actor who's portraying them, and certainly you wouldn't rule that out. You wouldn't dismiss it, well, it's just the actor's take on that character. You would look at the way that they are represented through that actor's portrayal of that character. So basically, just to clear that a little bit, to make it so that you discuss how a person's characterization creates meaning in the film, and how the characters help to add some sort of color and excitement to that film. Now, it may come from their ideologies or their beliefs. So you may be asked to talk about their values, just like you would if it's a play or a normal narrative, such as a novel or a short story. Now, the thing is, this may cause them to change. This may be represented in different ways throughout the film. So what it's up to you to do is to work out how characterization is important. Now, the other thing that's also comes out is relationships. So their relationships with other people. So film language helps to set them up. So in other words, you're never going to see the film's villain going over to an orphanage to hand over a big check for a large amount of money. All right? It's never going to happen. And the reason for that is because the film language wants to present them as a bad guy. And so everything that they are shown doing on camera and shown in the film as doing is bad. Now, that might seem fairly obvious when you're looking at, okay, well, he's a villain, so he's a bad guy. But the way that they portray the bad guy, the way that they frame him, the way that they, or her for that matter, the way that they design their costumes, the way that they look at their position in the film, everything is to set them up for being bad. So you're thinking, okay, what sorts of things make someone appear bad? Well, very simple. It's basically things like visual, audio, and film techniques. And they are used for your characterization. So the way that they are basically put in each frame, the way that they sound, the theme music that goes along with them. And really some of the most iconic themes have come as a result of characters and their character themes. And often films will have a character theme. And visuals, the way that they are basically shown, the way that they are framed, the way that they often seem more powerful sometimes. One thing to think about is things like, as I said before, their framing, their theme music, lighting and settings are also important as well. And some things that you can think about. Of course, this isn't limited to just those things, but they are things which are a good place to start. And think about how they are positioned in relation to other people. So how they are able to interact and talk with other people, if they are able to love, if they are able to not love, if they are closed off, and what meaning that has. So if you see a character who's closed off, then immediately you have to ask yourself the question, well, why? Why are they closed off? Why are they so determined not to talk? And that's something that the film is trying to get you to ask as you're going along and watching it and enjoying the ride of watching the film. Now the next bit is about interpreting meaning. Alright, and this is the hardest bit for many of you when you're studying a film, is to interpret it. And it's so tempting sometimes just rely on someone else's explanation, to get a teacher's explanation or a study guide or something like that. But the thing is, it's not always helpful. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, have your own interpretation is just simply better. It means that you're going to more likely construct a complete answer. But there are some other things as well. If you're writing an exam and you're trying to remember everything your teacher says, and you forget them, then that leaves you in a bit of a pickle. Because if you can't remember what they said, and you don't know what it is the film was saying, then it's very hard for you to write about it. So it's good that you have a little bit of your own interpretation thrown in as well. Of course, don't completely dismiss everything those things say. Use them for your ideas, but don't live and die by their explanations. Basically, come up with a few of your own as well. Come up with your own ideas. So, okay, how do you do that then? How do I interpret meaning? Well, let's have a look at a quick checklist of things to do. Watch the film first without taking notes. That's the best idea to start with. Don't be one of those people who madly scribbles down throughout the first watching of the film, because if you do that, you're never going to get the film. I mean, films aren't designed for you to take notes through. They're for you to have your complete and undivided attention. After you've done that, then you can go back and work on what you feel and think in your reaction to the film. Now, another thing as well is if you're watching it in class first and your teacher stops it rather annoyingly halfway through and says it does this and does this and does this and does this, and go on a big rambling speech, then what is the best thing to do is simply to go home and watch it. Watch it in your own time. Get the DVD version. Ask mum and dad real nicely if they can give you some money for the DVD. And then get your own feelings and thoughts and reactions to the film. That's the best way to go to start with. You should have a range of ideas which will basically be related to themes, ideas, and characterization. So you have a look at the characters and you work out why they are the way they are. And the ideas of the film, simply what the film's about. And the themes, what sort of feelings come out, what sort of emotions are played throughout the film, and constantly. And find out as well what aspects of filmmaking made you arrive at those conclusions. So how was the film put together in such a way that I came up with these ideas? Why do I think that that main character there is evil? Okay, well, because of the way that they are shot, the way that they are framed, the music that plays around them. So I'll give you some examples now of some questions that you might ask yourself. So some things like, for instance, what makes a character appear isolated? Why is the theme deaf? Or why do I think the theme might be deaf? Why does the idea of racism come out? And so on. So these are just a couple of sample questions, but keep asking yourself questions. You should always be curious, and that's one of the best things you can do when you're watching film, or indeed any other text type, is to keep asking yourself curious kinds of questions that will really open up the heart of what lies at each film. But also, it makes it more enjoyable for you to watch if you ask questions about it, rather than busily write down notes and then try and work out meaning by using study guides. That's the boring way to do it. If you work it out for yourself, then you often find it's more satisfying, first of all, but it means that you're engaging with the film on a much deeper level, which means not only are your responses better, but also you are talking about it in such a way where you are getting a little bit more out of the film than just simply watching it and using someone else's ideas about it. So that's basically it. So what we looked at, don't forget, is make sure that you interpret your films your own way. Find out how films construct meaning, and really it can be very simple and plain meanings. Look for things like ideas, themes, and characterization. But everything else is fairly easy once you get in the habit of doing it. So until next time, I'll see you later.